Welcome to Envision More. Here, we dig deep into the insights of first-generation wealth builders, unearthing stories of passion, resilience, and relentless vision. Your host is Wayne Wagner Jr., founder of Visionary Wealth Management. So sit back and dig in. It's time to envision more.
Hey, this is Wayne Wagner with another episode of the Envision More podcast. Today, we're going deep with my partner in crime here, Trent Booth. So Trent has been on a bunch of our episodes already. He's a longtime friend, coach, mentor. He runs a coaching company, Veritas Leadership Group. He does leadership development for our team, for a bunch of other successful businesses. And we've had him on with us. He's been helping me, but we haven't actually got the origin story of TB to this moment in time. So today we're going to do that. So we're probably a little late in this. I mean, we're
let's answer the question. Why is this guy with Wayne all the time? Does he work there? Let's solve for X. Let's go.
Yeah, and it's 1099, not W-2. So so I don't have to pay for your health insurance. So,
Indeed.
But you're from Canada, so you know paying for health insurance is new anyway. So
I love it.
Newer.
I love it. We're just gonna get that right at the beginning, right? And yet people aren't able to detect it. My wife, you talk to Christy, they can hear it immediately. She'll say about.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Nobody says a boot, but she does say about. That is a true statement. I do say process sometimes instead of process.
Okay.
And that's where I give myself away. But that, or if I have a wobbly pop, that's a beer in America.
Okay. I still didn't
wobbly pop. I might say a little bit more. That's real. The struggle is real, Wayne.
That's it. Good stuff. So Trent, I'm not going to belabor that introduction, but thank you for your assistance and support in getting the Envision More podcast out into the universe and to be a real thing. It's anytime you're going to try something this outside your 9 dots and just start putting yourself in front of a camera and a microphone and start talking, it is so beneficial to have somebody who's going to be there and say, yeah, I'll get on that diving board with you. I'll stand next to you and I'll jump with you. So I've been really blessed to have you on this journey here. And I'm sure we'll talk today about how we've been blessed to have you involved in developing our people at Visionary Wealth Management. But thanks for being here. Where do you want to start today? We're going to talk origin of TB.
I think we need full disclosure. I asked you whether it was the right move. The podcast really what Wayne Wagner needs? You're a busy guy, tons of assets under management, lots of work to do, and producing a podcast is not like a one-time project. This is you've been doing this for hours per week for a lot of weeks here, Wayne. So the part of me was like, is the juice worth the squeeze? Like, what are we going for here? And actually, I'm glad I asked the question. That is part of my job as coach is we should ask the questions and raise the awareness. Yeah. But I'm grateful that your answer was yes, and that we continue to explore it together and kind of dive in together, because it's been a blast. And one of the things I have said on an earlier podcast, I just want to reiterate, and that is, it's easy for me to forget that you and I walk the boards at Ocean City and we get to talk, and I've got access to Wayne. But this is a way to kind of give people a chance to listen in on on those conversations and hear some of the wisdom that I'm aware of, but not everybody necessarily gets to hear about. So I'm glad that you've got a podcast. I'm glad that I'm a guest and I don't have the time even to get on every single episode, but glad to be on this one and to dive in, talk a little bit more about me, which, I'm usually the one asking the questions, not answering them. So it might be a little uncomfortable here.
So we're gonna find out how good of a student I've been in terms of asking questions. Talk less, listen more, and because that's not my default setting either. So
yeah, it's a lifetime. I've been blessed to have been on a few podcasts. That's been a nice thing early, and even just a public speaking thing. Like I started. Coming out of high school, I wanted to be a theater major, and I was for like a semester. And then that was like, that seems like a lot of work. And I like acting, but I don't love it. And I was like, if you don't love this, you're going to get regularly punched in the face. You should get out if you don't love it. And I have friends that love it and have done great. I knew that I would use those skills in other things. And for me, it was in sales and sales training, and then eventually leadership development. So again, I figured if I was going to accelerate that growth, if I could get good at public speaking, if I could get good at saying words, having them leave my lips, hit your ears, and I could change your trajectory, change your behavior, then I could be effective in sales, sales training, in leadership, and that was going to carry me far. So that's parlayed into a lot of different other side gigs, whether it be at church or whether it be at podcasting with buddies.
Yeah. Now I know in terms of the origin story for you, born and raised in Canada.
Yeah, kind of all over. Yeah, Western
Yeah.
Canada, originally Vancouver. I would have really called home growing up, but finished in Ottawa, where Christy and I first lived when we were married. 2 of our kids were born there. We've been down here for 20 years.
Okay.
This is home now. Like
Right.
our youngest is a Jersey girl, legit. So outside Philly, and it's been a great place to raise a family. So yeah, I would say still card carrying Canadian. I don't have my citizenship here in the States yet. I am an immigrant. Yes.
Yeah.
Just to remind you, because sometimes people forget. They're like, hey, didn't look like an immigrant. I think I do. I look like an immigrant.
But if you're going to be an immigrant, at least it's from our friendly neighbors to the north. So
I'm a good, I'm telling you, I would say I am a legal alien. How about that? Legal
yeah.
alien. Good
Well,
process.
what's the old? I mean, Canada and the U.S. longest unprotected border in the world.
Which is
Because
remarkable. Yeah, Canada has no greater friend than the U.S., and I'd like to think the opposite is true as well. And when you've got that long unprotected border that has been peaceful, all right,
yeah,
with the
yeah.
exception of maybe the War of 1812. I mean, how do you know that the Canadians won? Well, it's still Canada. That's how we know. Just a reminder, we got one win, America 0.
Yeah. Well, just keep your politicians up there, will you? So your prime minister first and foremost. So
I plead the fifth on that one. I
there
can't
you
speak
go.
to Trudeau. That's not
That's right.
helpful.
He might not let you, but you go visit family
It's
if
not
you
helpful.
don't
It's not
plead the
going to get. It's not going to kick off my podcast great at all. People will be like, "What's he doing?"
So let's. I mean, you mentioned using superpowers in terms of persuasion, communication for sales. Like, what was your first sales job?
If I go right back, I didn't really want to go into sales. My dad was at Procter and Gamble,
Okay.
and so was my grandfather before him, and
Hmm.
and so I wanted to be a businessman like my dad, but I didn't think I wanted to go into sales. Uh, and then a friend of mine was selling vacuums. I'm like, wow, you have a flexible schedule, you make some money. I'm like, dude. Secretly in my heart, I was like, that would be amazing. A couple of weeks later, I saw this ad in the newspaper for Cutco Cutlery selling knives, and I was like, I could totally do that. And I'm not normal in that sense. I was like, most people are like knives in people's houses. That sounds weird. So I'm like, I can totally do this. And so yeah, cut my teeth selling Cutco Cutlery in 1993, and had a blast doing it. Loved it. Made some good money. Learned way more about myself than I was anticipating. So the personal growth piece of that was huge. And when you face adversity and
Mm-hmm.
not quite crisis, but when you have your fifth no sale in a row and with people
Right. Right.
at that, you learn a lot about yourself in terms
Right.
of like, okay, I don't want to get on the phone right now. Well, if I don't schedule appointments, I won't make more money. That was hard,
Yeah.
really hard,
Yeah.
but also really, really valuable, and maybe so much more valuable in the job market afterwards. And that, I like to say that character's forged in the fires of adversity.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot of adversity at first there in that sales role. In fact, it never really gets away from you because you're at 0 at the beginning of every month,
Yep.
which is awesome and terrible all at the same time. So made that first year was really good. I switched my major up. I went into Bible college instead of theater. And by the beginning of my second year, they were like, hey, tapping me for management. And there was an opportunity to open up an office in Saskatchewan, where my family's originally from. So I could go to like Regina, which is a real magical place, Regina, Saskatchewan. And yeah, it's legit. The locals call it Ray JJ, but I'm getting away from myself here.
Not far
It's
from Blue. Not
Regina is a real place. It's Latin for queen.
okay. There
And,
you
and
go.
the original Latin, you'd say Regina, but it's not nearly as fun as what it's become. It's Regina. So I had an opportunity to run an office in Regina, but Montreal opened up, and I had to, in December, I had like 4 grand saved. So when I open up an office, it's like you're a 1099 here, you're an independent contractor, and they wanted me to save a certain amount of money because Montreal is expensive. So I had to have 10 grand saved. I had 4. I'm going to school, and they wanted me to save another 4 grand. Sorry, $6,000. I needed to
Mm.
get to 10,000 before I opened up. I had to save, not earn, in the next 3 months
Right.
while going to school and learning
Right.
French.
Right.
And it was funny. It was one of those things where the dream was, if I do 20 calls a day, I get to go to Montreal. That was the math. If I did 20 calls a day, I'd get the number of appointments, which would get me the sales, which would get me the revenue to go.
Mm-hmm.
And I literally made it like promise of pleasure or the promise of pain.
Yeah.
And if I do the 20 calls, I get to go to Montreal and live the dream. If I don't, I'm going to Regina. Now, hear me, it's a lovely place. I'm a big fan of Regina. However, Montreal just objectively is much cooler. And I did get to go to Montreal in the end. My dad helped me out with the last $1,500. Thanks, Daddy-O. Tommy Booth came in clutch in the end. I got to 8,500. I'm like, Dad, I need to borrow some money. He's like, I got you. And I did pay it back down the line. But yeah, I got to go to Montreal and become a district manager for Cutco. And I worked there for 30 years, which is
Wow.
crazy to say. I worked at one company from 19 to 49 years old. I worked at Cutco Cutlery and learned all the nuances of leadership development and sales training and eventually coaching. So
Yeah.
we had a vice president that was a coach there, and he got sick. He had pancreatic cancer, and Marty
Mm.
Dimitrovich fought for years. When normally pancreatic cancer is
Usually
much
pretty
faster.
quick.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
usually a matter of weeks or months. But
Right.
so when he passed, there was a big hole, and I by no means was I trying to even stand on the shoulders of giants. I'm not going to be a
Mhm.
Marty Dimitrovich, but I've got his exercises, and I did have time. I was able to get my work done quickly and then just talk to people and support the field with one-on-one phone calls. I didn't call it coaching. I just called it, hey, let me just pour into you.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
got 45 minutes and I'll pour into you and I'll just ask about your business and let's see if that helps. And apparently it really did help a lot. And as I got some formal training at the John Maxwell group, I was able to parlay that even more and ask questions of people that I in an industry where I didn't have any experience. So
Mhm.
coaching doesn't require that I actually have knowledge in somebody's industry. So, for example, why is Trent Booth working with a Wayne Wagner or a Mike Mall over at Mall Retirement Group when he's not been in the financial services industry? It's like, well, I now have a lot of experience in that because I've been coaching in that space now for about
Right.
7 years. But initially, it was just being able to ask good questions and get really
Yeah.
curious. At Cutco, it turned out more what I was doing. If there's three different disciplines, there's therapy, there's mentoring, and then there's coaching.
Mhm.
Coaching, 80% future, 20% past, just for context. Therapy, more the flip side of that,
Yeah.
80% past,
Mm.
20% future. And mentoring would just require that I can still ask questions, but I've got to have some knowledge in the world that you're looking to operate in there. So
Mhm.
coaching doesn't require that I have that type of expertise, but I do have to be good at asking smart people really good questions. So
Yeah.
that's where I'll come up for air. 30 years at Cutco.
Yeah, that's great. And what I'm hearing is that earliest, the resilience was forged early on. So 19 years old, 20 calls a day. I mean, I literally just had a conversation with a client this morning about her son who's talking about becoming a financial advisor. And I told the kid to go see if he could get an internship at Edward Jones because Edward Jones will have you knocking on doors. And mom's immediate response was, "Well, that sounds dangerous." And so overlay that to Cutco, at least you're going in well armed.
Well, at least
So
I was seeing people I
right.
knew. I'll put it that way. Which it's to some people it's scarier to present to friends and family,
Yeah,
but that was it, and it felt a little safer to me than knocking on doors, even in the '90s in
right.
Canada, which is again I would say relatively safe.
Yeah,
Got the knives, big knives. But I highly recommend that young people get out there and get real experience very quickly,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Um, Jim Rohn used to say, don't take a job where anybody could do it because it doesn't pay much because anybody could do it. We
Hmm.
can just pay somebody else. Minimum wage is the least possible I could pay you
Yeah,
and still be legal.
yeah,
Whereas in sales, I love the idea of me getting paid what I felt I was worth.
yeah,
And if I studied more, I could be worth more and I could get more
yeah.
success because I leveled up my skills.
Right.
Or I could get better at asking for referrals, or I could close better, or I could present options better, etc.
Yeah,
To get young people to figure that out, that's where the seeds of entrepreneurship were planted for me, for sure. Is
yeah.
what you put in can be what you get out if you're in the right opportunity.
And I was going to say the Cutco model allows you to move up into management, where now you're going to do this. You can still make money selling, but or and you're going to be able to go hire people again on 1099 and help them get through that first 100, 200, 500 no's,
Yeah,
and get
yeah,
help them walk through. And I mean, I've told my story of having somebody, just sit there and watch me wilt in front of a client.
yeah.
When you're practicing that tell, show, try, do process of
Mhm.
walking someone through those earliest stages, and then it can be really, really rewarding as a young person, 19, 20, 21 years old. It's hey, you're doing good at this. start training you to do it. Let's start having you train other people.
Remarkable to have that opportunity at 20 to be called an assistant manager and at 21 to become a branch or district manager.
Yeah.
It's uncommon to be able to have that much authority
Yeah.
at that age.
Yeah.
So to be able to train and be responsible for the city. I'll never forget flying over the city of Montreal, looking down at 21, and I was days into being 21 years old. And I'm like, that's my city. What kind of company lets a 21-year-old, and I was a kid, a
Right.
21-year-old
Right.
kid run the territory? I'm like,
Yeah.
wow. But I'd also earned it, which is fascinating. It's a really odd model, but one that's even hard to replicate. But they got something special there at Cutco.
Well, and ironically, though, you and I would talk about that today, and would say, hey, kids are 22 still getting through college, or 25 coming out with their MBA or something, and they haven't done anything yet. That's opposite of what virtually every military in the world does.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, we literally go fight wars and defend liberty and independence and our way of life around the world, by putting 18 to 22-year-olds in charge of hundreds of millions of dollars of equipment in people's lives and saying, go do this really, really hard thing.
Mm.
And yet, as a society, we've normalized, no, 18 to 22 should be partying at college and getting a piece of paper in
Okay.
gender
Yeah.
studies or something.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
it's,
We want to keep people in the bubble. The challenge with that is that they don't get strong, they don't get tough.
yeah,
If any parents listening to this and your kid's got an opportunity to do something hard, I can't recommend it enough. At 18, that's the time to scrape your knees. At 18, that's the time to have I didn't sell this week, so I don't have a paycheck this week. That's
yeah,
the time to figure that out,
yeah,
not 30.
yeah,
So I would
yep,
strongly recommend. Plus, it gives you grit. I would say if you can grit through that and gut through that as a kid,
yeah,
it makes you hard to kill later, when
yep,
you get into your 30s and this is a hard position or marriage is hard, etc.
yeah,
You've got the wherewithal to know, hey, I'm up against it, but I also know if I just keep moving my legs, I'll get through this.
yeah,
That is an essential life skill that people can get by going into a sales position
yep,
as young as possible. So I hesitated when you asked me what was my first sales job, because I did technically have a paper route when I was like 13, but I wasn't good at selling it at all.
right,
I wasn't good, and I didn't stick with it. My brother, by the way, instead got all those subscriptions. He's a much better sales guy, and he'd get cool stuff like skiing gloves, and he'd win it by getting all these subscriptions, and I wasn't very good at it. So I identified as not being good at sales,
mm,
despite the fact that I totally could change that direction.
yeah. Well, that mental image of how we think about ourselves and who we believe ourselves to be will be how we show up in the world, right? And so until we decide to change that definition of ourselves, that image of ourselves, yeah,
So what a blessing for me at 19 to be able to change radically what I saw myself becoming, doing, and being capable of. I'll put it that way.
right,
And I've actually tried to parlay that into other areas of life. So I was just talking the other day about how I didn't think I was a Mac guy, and I wasn't until 2007, where we decided, you know what, we should get an iMac, and we did. And now we're Mac people. And
mm,
this is one little microcosm there. I didn't identify as being a runner. I only ran when I was in trouble in high school. Soccer, I do laps if I'm late. I didn't like running. And in my 30s, I've got friends that are marathoning. I'm like, that would be cool. And they're like, you should do it. I'm like, you're right. I totally should. So I trained for a marathon. And after that, a buddy of mine had done an ultra marathon. That's 50 miles or more in one
mm,
time. I was like, I should run 2 marathons in a row. And I did. And I'm not saying that to impress you, but to impress upon you the value of pressing out on the boundaries of who am I and what could I do?
yeah,
Full disclosure, I grew up in Canada not playing hockey. I played my first organized hockey game at 39 years old
mm,
after watching my son do it and thinking that would be so awesome. I wish I was a hockey player. And I'm like, dude, you're 39. You could learn how to do this.
mm,
You could learn how to play the bass at 42 years old. My grandfather learned to play piano at 88. And I remember thinking to
wow,
myself, why would you pick up a piano at 88? Well, because I want to live to be 94. And if I
right,
keep my brain engaged and my hands moving, that kinesthetic movement, that is awesome.
right.
And yes, maybe he lives a little longer because he's still learning new stuff, taking square dancing at 90. I'm like, God bless, Grandpa. Way to go,
There you
man.
go.
That's
That's great.
wild. Keep pressing the boundaries of the way that you see yourself, and then what could happen.
Learning to dance at 90. That's where the girls are showing up, right?
Yeah.
So
By the way, yeah. He'd tear up the dance floor there at
there you
90,
go.
Yeah.
That's it. Good stuff. So you 30 years at Cutco, growing, developing. Um, I meet you decade or so ago.
Yeah, about
Um,
12. Yeah.
our first encounter is like a little raw. We're at a church event, and you're kind of
We should
reprimanding
tell the
my
story, dude.
kid. So,
It's a great story. It's horrifying at first, and on paper, friends, we should not be friends.
so
This should have gone
yeah,
so badly. So my recollection of this was I'm new to this church, but I'd been a pastor at the other church. So for some reason, I think I'm refereeing like a field game at a picnic, and a big kid kind of runs into a little kid. So the big kid, I'm like, hey, you're out for now. It's almost like penalty on the play. Um, wasn't clearing the fray, and the kid thinks he's disqualified from all day, and he's not. So that kid happens to be Bryce Wagner,
yep,
and he goes and tells Papa Bear that guy kicked me out of this game. And now, if you've not met Wayne, it's hard to tell on the podcast. He's an imposing figure. So at first, I think I felt the shadow of Wayne walking up to me, and then I looked up and said, "Papa Bear's here, and I'm in trouble." And he's like, and you're like, to your credit, under restraint, you're like, is he out for the day or just that? I'm like, oh no, he can come right back in. It's fine. Good answer, Trent. And self-preservation is an instinct that I possess. And hey, the next day I followed up, and I think either you approached me or I approached you. It might have been you coming to me, and I was like, "Hey, brother, I apologize again for how that went down. Thank you for coming and talking to me. Are we good?" And it was one of those, "Are we best friends?" And it worked out really great ever since.
yeah.
So, what's your version of that though? Because I'm not sure I've got that right. It's 12 years, and I
Yeah,
count on the
well,
fact I'm
and
cloudy.
it's not far off. I mean, my son was elementary school at the time. He was a big kid. He was heavy. If you see Bryce today, he is cut and ripped and svelte, and he's a stud.
Yeah,
But he turned himself into that, in high school, and he was a little thick around the edges, and so he was playing this game, and they were dumping water into a bucket or something, and he went to slide into kind of home plate to dump the water in the bucket or something, and just took out this kid that was about half his size.
yeah,
And that kid bounced back like rubber, and it was okay. But
everybody's fine.
you kind of saw, and I kind of watched, you kind of saw it, and then you were like, tap Bryce and kind of gave him the thumb.
Yeah,
And I had seen it.
okay.
Of course, Bryce comes over sobbing,
Oh,
eyes
yeah,
running,
crocodile tears. He's
bawling.
devastated. I crushed his
He
soul.
kicked me out. I'm out for the rest of the day. I can't help my team. I'm not going to make friends. And all the things that an insecure,
Yeah,
elementary school kid is feeling in those moments. And it doesn't help that, the fact that he's the fluffy kid and that kind of stuff. So it was just, it was a moment. So I'm sitting there going, okay, so how do I show up here? First of all, I'd already learned my most important lesson, which was I had been the parent when my kids were swimming for 2 seasons. That was like walking up and down the side of the pool, encouraging my kids while I'm supposed to be sitting down and shutting up. And so they had like sent around 6 emails asking the parents not to do that. And I didn't get the emails because my wife was on the email chain and I wasn't.
nice,
And
nice.
so I end up during a event at the end of a pool talking to a coach that I've never seen before, and I'm trying to give my daughter some words of counsel, and this guy's telling me to go sit down, and I'm ready to throw him in the pool. And it was like this humiliating, like I go talk to the head coach, and the head coach is like, Wayne, we've sent 6 emails trying not to call you out by name, but you're literally the only parent who interrupts our practices to talk to your kids. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm that guy. And so by the time you and I have that encounter, I have learned that lesson, and I'm not going to be
Mm,
that guy who's going to, come in assuming and presuming, and,
mm.
you yelled at my kid, and I'm going to be inquisitive. I'm going to ask questions, and like, I saw what happened too. And, you know,
Is he
so
good? I was
yeah,
like, hey, he's
yeah.
really good. You put him back in.
So, but so I mean, and that's a moment in time, Trent, where,
Mm,
like, when we have a rough interaction with someone. I mean, one of the things we talk about in the Wagner family all the time is like, man, you never know what somebody else is going through when they are, like, exploding on you in this moment. And it's been some of the most healthy conversations we've ever had in our family are spots where one of us is blowing up and somebody else just asks the question, hey, are you okay? Because you seem to be bringing a lot more emotion to this moment than it warrants. And then, you can kind of exhale and go, no, I had a crap day at work, or this happened, or that happened. And when there's an environment of trust, you can get to the root of things. And so, you and I happen to have, this is an example of you
It
and
was
I
a
both
good
got it.
day.
Oh, yeah, it
Yeah.
was a good day for both of us.
Yeah, we both could have missed. If you give us both 10 more shots at that, I don't know if I get it right every time, and as a coach, I should get it more than I do, but, I'm glad at that moment it worked out because I don't have too many friends I'm like, where it started where it could have been chaos and fire. It could have been
Right.
absolute devastation from go, and could have made an enemy in that moment just by handling it wrong or just
Yeah.
looking sideways at you and just kind of doubling down. And so I'm grateful that I had some clarity, grateful you had clarity and some humility in that moment. Because I've been Papa Bear too, where I'm like, I'm curious, but I'm also not a step away from like really decisive on what this means. Like, so I'm grateful for grace in that moment. That worked out great. And then we were in a men's discipleship class together, so we were just kind of
Mhm.
learning, what it is to be, just a godly man of character and walking right and kind of living out what we believe to be true. And from there, we just started getting some time together. And we were in, what we say, a small group where we're getting together systematically every couple of weeks, where our
Yeah.
families are getting to know each other. And Christy and May are becoming friends, and our kids are the same age. And all of a sudden, Jake and Bryce are best buddies.
Yeah.
Hanging out.
Yeah, and that's another story where Bryce was in a tough spot, and he was just mentally not in a great place and not in a healthy place. And we were at a youth group event, and Jake went and asked and said to Bryce, "Hey, why don't you sit with us?" And then at the end of that Saturday night, he said, "Hey, I'll see you at church tomorrow." And for Bryce, that was one of those moments in middle school that that he tells a story that um, I was not in a healthy place, and now all of a sudden I had a friend, and
Mm,
one friend can make all the difference. And those two guys are now, 20 years old and doing amazing things together, and dreaming about. I mean, we got to find spouses for each of these guys, but I,
yeah.
I think that even 10, 20, 30 years from now, these two guys are probably going to be doing life together.
I was gonna
um,
say they're probably best men at each other's weddings. It's one of those like,
yeah,
all right, they're connected at those key moments where they've got lots of time and they've had lots of times to dream together as well and just
yeah,
kind of do life together. I love that they're working on some cool stuff right now, both at 96 Shades and year round. I mean they're roommates at this point, so it's cool to see that relationship kind of build and grow.
yeah, for sure. Yeah. So you 30 years at Cutco. I want to kind of roll the clock forward because I'm also conscious about time and that kind of thing. But so you start doing some coaching, even extra Cutco coaching, picking up a few coaching clients, and then here was it 2 years ago, 3 years ago, you step out with
Yeah,
Veritas.
about a year and a half. It's
Okay, year and a half.
very it's
Okay.
still fresh. I mean, the paint's just drying here on the building. Veritas Leadership Group. Let me go back. So I'm doing the coaching at Cutco and having a blast with it. And I say, what a blessing to be able to actually get like my first 10,000 hours of coaching
Hmm.
without having to send an invoice. It's so rare. And it usually takes
Right.
coaches a lot longer to hit that number and
Yeah.
get to mastery because they're invoicing people. Well,
Right. Right.
I had a unique opportunity where I was already being paid a salary. And because the people I was coaching was doing well, the company made it my job. So again,
Mm.
power to Cutco to actually identify a guy who's making a difference. They let me write my own position description, which I've never even heard of that being a thing, and created a whole department of leadership development for me and some other people to just support
Mm.
those in the field.
Right.
So my job was to coach people. So I was able to get 10,000 hours of coaching at Cutco, and then I was curious. I'm like, well, if it's working here, could it work elsewhere? And a couple of our Cutco people had moved on, which happens, and alumni were like, "Hey, could we use you outside of Cutco?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, but Cutco's not paying for that, so you're going to need to pay for that." And
Right.
lo and behold, the coaching was working outside of Cutco too.
Hmm.
So we started Veritas Leadership Group. I say we a lot. I started Veritas Leadership Group. Love the idea of just that Latin term of truth, and coaching is designed to emerge awareness, and the truth sets you free. So the idea of seeing things as they clearly are, using that in a coaching context at Veritas Leadership Group. I didn't want to name it Trent Booth Coaching because I did have a hope that sometime down the line, this would be a full-time gig, not a side gig,
Hmm.
and that I'd have other coaches that might be more likely to work with me than if I'm, Trent Booth coaching or Trent Booth
Yeah.
leadership. So
Yeah.
decided to go with the Veritas leadership group, and we do have some affiliate coaches. But just to close that loop there, about 2 years ago, I'm kicking around tires saying, "Hey, is it time to go?" And when you're at any company for 30 years, I mean, I wasn't there because I didn't love it. Stated positively, I loved the person I was becoming. Still, 2 years ago on this day,
Yeah.
at Vector and Cutco, and I had an amazing role, um, an exciting role where I had influence and people that I'd grown up around. So I wasn't the only guy there with 30 years. I mean, my friends and mentors that I grew up with are all in that same spot. So it's almost
Yeah.
like if you had an experience at summer camp and then you got to do that as your job for 30
Right.
years,
Right. Right.
why would you go? Well, in my case, it was a matter of I grew with the time I had available Veritas about as much as I could. I'd
Hmm.
more than replaced income. And then it's time to ask the question, hey, is it time to step out and do this elsewhere? And one of the
Yeah.
defining moments was just, again, walking the boards with you in Ocean City. And I think either you or I emerged the idea that, hey, in 10 years, Trent, have you left? And the answer was yes. Well, if you give yourself 10 years to grow this as opposed to 5, it's going to grow larger ostensibly in that 10 years than it would just in the 5.
Yeah.
That made some sense. And then one of the key questions that you asked me was, how long would it take you to replace, that vector income? Right. It wasn't like how your first question was, how long would it take you to replace? I said a year. I said, how about to replace it in a way that's sustainable in the way you want it? I said, well, that would probably take 2. And that was empowering for me to just kind of work through the idea of burning the ships and actually making the leap. It
Mhm.
was less scary from a perspective of, hey, it wasn't wondering if this worked. This did work, and I hadn't fully looped my wife in terms of what the actual finances were about. I was like, honey, this is what it's earning right now. She's like, really? I was like, yes, it's quite a bit more than what we were making at Vector. She's like,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
it's time to try this. And so we did. In January of 23, decided to step out and start Veritas Leadership Group, and so far so good.
Well, yeah, and on my side, Trent, just outside observation, was that I was seeing what you're doing and Vector with Vector and Cutco, and it's, um, but again, but you're really developing young people through those. It's like being a drill sergeant who runs basic training,
Yeah,
if that's a fair
that's a good analogy.
analogy,
I like that.
where
Yeah,
you've got a certain set of curriculum that you're bringing people through, and yet that same set of skills could have you running a SEAL team
yeah,
and
that's it.
and having a much bigger impact and working with much bigger impact players, helping them do much more effective, bigger things. And it's not that one's important and one's not; they're different, and the compensation structures are different. And the
Mhm.
owning something that's yours, putting a name of your choice on the door, building something that's more of your own creation, and then the long term, the compensation structure is affiliate associated with that, as you step in. And look, for us at Visionary, I worked my tail off. I built a successful financial planning firm. We built that firm to 1.3 to 1.5 million dollars a year in revenue, um, and and we're on a growth trajectory, but I'm hitting a wall in that I have to hire more people.
Mhm.
I have to develop those people. I don't have bandwidth or budget or attention span to hire a full-time development person inside to develop my people,
Yeah, yeah.
but I need them developed. And and I'm not trustworthy. I don't trust people to come do this with me. Like, and I don't want to spend a whole lot of money. And like, and I'm frugal, and all those things.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I was asking you questions early on to say, hey, look, I'm on a growth trajectory. How do I, like, 5 years from now? How do I even measure how much of my growth was affiliated, associated with what you
Mhm.
poured into my team versus what we were going to do without you here.
Sure.
Right. And so
Fair question. Yeah.
justification. And so I was really skeptical about,
Yeah.
I've done some coaching programs. I've done a lot of personal development, but in terms of actually engaging with the team, and the bottom line is, in a relatively short period of time, we've been able to grow our team from me plus two people to me plus seven people. Every one of those people works with either you or one of your other coaches. My people are developing. There's common language, vocabulary about personalities, highlights and lowlights, strong points and weak points. We're able to talk intelligently internally, and we've tripled revenue in over that period of time as well. And that's been tripled revenue in less than 5 years, I think. So 5, 6 years maybe. And that's kind of through COVID as well, right?
Right.
When anytime you can take a successful business, and for a financial advisor, who there are a lot of advisors who go build an independent business
Mhm.
and they figure out how to get to kind of the low seven figures, but you can do that almost as a solopreneur with the right business model, with the right marketing strategies,
Yep.
with a good support team. You can get there
Mhm.
a bunch of different ways. You can't triple that revenue from there without a
Correct.
team.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so I was at a point where I needed to grow the team. I needed to develop the team. And even to this day, you and I don't get together every 2 weeks and
Sure.
for a coaching
Yeah.
session.
Yeah.
You and I get together for more like, well, we get to do some informal stuff here,
Yeah.
but we get to, you and I get together for every couple of months for a longer block of time for my own coaching, because that's
Yep.
giving me the ability to look at a high level where my people are, at a high level where I am, and then think strategically with somebody who's now gotten to know my business and that kind of thing, to ask healthy questions about how I'm thinking about the next 2 months, the next 3 months, the next 6 months.
Yeah.
Am I on course? Am I thinking correctly about the kinds of people we need to add to the team and how we're thinking about growing the business and those kinds of things? So it's been, and so selfishly, very selfishly, when you and I are walking the boards in Ocean City, I'm going, Trent is being very effective helping my team grow. But as a coach, you can have 50 clients in 50 different industries
Right.
where you're pulled in 50 different directions and you need a lobotomy for every new call you're going to have today.
Learning 50
Uh,
different languages in that world.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. That's
And
a lot
so,
of language.
or
Yeah.
selfishly,
Yeah.
if I could talk you into, hey, step out,
Yeah.
Veritas, pull it out, put it out, hang that shingle, and position yourself for financial advisors. Yes, you can work with experts in every field, but you probably don't want to be in 50 different fields. And so
Yeah.
even if we can get you to 50 or 60% of your clients in the financial advisory world, then you're going to have a niche. You're going to make more money, way more money than you ever thought you were going to. And you're going to, I mean, helping advisors go from a seven figure number that starts with a one to a seven
Yeah.
figure number that starts with a five or a six or a 10. That's, I guess, 10, it's actually an eight figure number. But when you're, that's different than
Mm.
running basic training at Cutco,
Correct.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the ability for you to impact more, magnify your impact, and partner with people who are then pouring into their people and pouring into their communities. So I think about
Mhm.
like when you help an advisor go from, 1.5 to 5, and the charitable giving goes
Sure.
from 25 to 100 to 200,000 a year. It's only, it's still less than 5% of the revenue of the business, but it's natural
Mhm.
that will happen. That generosity gene will happen as the business grows. Well,
Yeah.
you get to vicariously live through that. Now, you don't put it on your business card to say I helped, this much go to charity, but
Sure.
there's something to that,
It
and there's
feels
something
good.
tangible and
It feels
meaningful in
good to
that
see
impact.
the checks go to foster the family and supporting other ones and just to contribute to it. And I often, to your point, not only am I not putting it on the resume, you did it. So like, love being there to celebrate and being a catalyst and perhaps part of that. But the participants are the ones that are doing the work. And,
Right.
I'm pretty quick to make a disclaimer here, just because if advisors are listening to this going, hey, I'm at 1.5, could I be at 5? You could. So, results, right? What's the saying there? Past
Past
results,
performance, not no guarantee of future results.
bingo. So, like, all right. Also, it's real. So, like, and you're not the first person or the only one that we've done that in that industry in particular. What was funny is I was referred to an advisor, and he called his buddy back after talking with me. He goes, "Dude, this is expensive." My rates at the time were like $25,000 per year per person. He goes, "Is this worth the money?" And my friend, I couldn't have scripted a better answer, but I've shared it many times since. He goes, "If it's not worth 10x what you're paying, you're doing it wrong. Yes, it's worth the money. Yes, it's 25 grand, but if you start revenuing, if you go 1.5 to 5, you would take that deal all day long."
Yeah.
And the right question isn't necessarily, well, how much that is Trent or how much would we have done? It's real. It happened. And we probably did it faster. And this is part of where I would say, what is the secret sauce in the coaching? Wayne's a really smart guy. The tricky part is to get Wayne to catch up to his thoughts, is to actually even help Wayne get linear. So he's got many thoughts going through his mind to help Wayne become consciously aware of opportunities and then to take action on that and then to be able to show his work with others. That's what I think the coaching has been able to do for you, singularly for you, but working with the team, it's also been able to get them acting more entrepreneurially. So they've all got their little piece of the garden that they're crushing, and they're able to move the needle without necessarily be mustered by you. You're there to kind of wave the pom poms, et cetera, but you've got excellent people that are working interdependently to support that extra growth of all that extra business that you're writing up. And we necessarily had to grow. And this is an important point here, is that we had a very cool culture when there's two, and it's not natural for that culture to be maintained when you triple that.
Yeah.
When you go from
Yeah.
2 to 7 people, it's more normal that you would lose what made it great when it was small. When it gets big, it's not the same. So that was part of the task ahead of us, was to study what already is awesome, not bring awesome. You guys are amazing already. You, Mark and Wendy, tremendous. Let's celebrate what is true and real and amazing about this, and so that we can keep it for when we get larger. And I think we've done a pretty great job with that. I love
Yeah.
where we're at. And here's the best part. We're not done. Like, it's one of those, that's some pretty wild growth.
Yeah. Yeah.
1.5 to 5, and we're not done. I mean,
Yeah.
this infrastructure is strong.
Yeah, and well, and you just said something that your buddy said, if it's not worth 10 times what you pay, you're doing it wrong. That there's two things in that that were worth unpacking. Number one, I as the coachee or the coached, I have a responsibility,
Correct.
right? And I know, and one of the things I've been really glad to see with my team is that my team spends time writing notes, preparing for their coaching session. So
Yeah.
when my team sees that I'm spending money, now thankfully I'm not spending $25,000 per person at this stage, but we spend a fair
We
amount.
grandfathered
And
some old pricing in for you and your team. Yes.
right. Um, but but I see my team taking that seriously, appreciating the investment,
Yeah.
affirming and respecting the investment by taking the work seriously in between. In between the
Yeah.
coaching sessions and when they're together, when we're together as a group, that's number one. Number two, when you the 10x, like in the financial planning world, I see people who do marketing who are thrilled with a 1.5 to 3x return. So they'll spend money to
Even at
fill a room
1.1. Yeah, I've
at
seen
a
it. Yeah.
local steakhouse, to do a workshop, to feed people rubber chicken or
Right.
well done steak, to make the pitch, to make
Yeah.
the request, to become a client of a financial planning firm, and they're thrilled if they can get a 1.5 to 3x multiple. And I would say definitively, from our experience, the return on investment is multiples of that. And so if you're willing to spend that money, and this is, a little bit of an advertisement for Veritas, but if you're
Right.
willing to spend money and get 1.5 to $3 out for your
Yeah.
dollar of investment, spending money on coaching for you and your people is worth, that, what's it, the juice is worth the squeeze, or the squeeze is
Yeah.
worth the juice, or whatever. So
One of my first clients, an alumni, he was saying, Trent, what's the program? Like, what's the book? What's the Tony Robbins seminar? What's the, who's the thought leader? Where do I put my people so that they can
Mhm.
grow? And he was a startup. He's like, we've got green, they're green, but they got a lot of talent, just not a lot of
Mhm.
skill yet. How do we
Yeah.
ramp them up? I said, what you're looking for doesn't exist outside of coaching. Coaching is what can unlock them. And the best part is all the gains that they get to keep with the coach, but it's
Right.
consistency and it's constancy. We're talking twice a month for 24 times this year, and that's where you'll really start to see the growth. And some of them I've been coaching now for 5 years, and the retention rate goes through the roof. So it certainly goes well beyond just the dollars and the business going up. When you consider the fact that people are being coached typically stay,
Yeah.
people that are green and growing like to stick around that company. So there are tremendous ancillary benefits of that coaching piece. But even on top of that, the idea of enjoyment, so in many cases, it's not just that we've driven revenue, but the quality of life goes up
Right.
because you like
Right.
the people you're working with. One of the guys I was working with is about 50, 60 hours a week, financial advisor, evenings and weekends, a lot of those dinner seminars. And even during COVID, before COVID, I was like, dude, we can do this. You can do this, some of these via Zoom. You can do this during the day. When I go see my dentist, I don't see him at 8 o'clock on a Friday night. Like I see him during the day. I take time off work. So we were able to change his schedule. He's down to about 30, 35 hours. He's doubled revenue. And again, it's not just doubling revenue. That'd be awesome if he just maintained revenue but got that life back.
Right.
Or on the other
Right.
side, worked just as hard and double the revenue, but he's got both, which is a double whammy. So
Yeah.
that is sustainable growth. And that's part of what we're able to do with the coaching. But part of that's because it's not just the leader. I think this is what makes Veritas a little bit different. Um, Full disclosure, part of the reason the pricing is different is I'm not working with everybody at Visionary, but
Right.
somebody I'm working with is. So an affiliate coach is working with the rank and file contributors. I'm working typically with the visionary and their integrator. So let's say the top two people in the tall cotton. And what that allows though is the whole company then is green and growing. The
Yeah.
whole company is green and growing. And frankly, by having an affiliate coach, they're bringing in a diverse set of voices. So not just my voice is emerging. Sometimes they're coming up with better answers than I would have with your particular people. So
Right.
there's been a
Right.
lot that's really just been a pleasure to observe, not just at Blue Chip, restoration, but also working with visionaries, just in seeing, hey, getting in early. What if we built this thing right the first time? What could it look like? It's been pretty sweet.
Right. No, that's great. Yeah, and so where would you ideally like you're working with successful people today? I mean, this is the Envision More podcast. So
Yeah.
what are you envisioning for the next 3, 5, 10
Yeah.
years?
One of the things I've loved the most about being a solopreneur myself now at this point, again, I would say, is the I'm dreaming in a way that I have not for a long time. So the last year and a half, and even thinking about launching the business, I'm like, man, what could be possible? And things emerged for me like, okay, what if I had coaches, like a bank of coaches, that if a company rolled up and said, we want 100 coaching hours a month, that I would have enough bandwidth to be able to support that.
Mhm.
Like that would be a big undertaking. That would be bigger than what we could handle right now. But we are incubating. We're working and developing our coaches to get their 10,000 hours for mastery, and people that are like-minded with me. They're not easy to find, and it takes time to be able to forge those diamonds, those other coaches. So down the line, I would like to continue to develop our coaching roster and develop other coaches. A lot of people that are excellent, love their industry, but they want to have a third act and perhaps want to step out of their industry and have some more flexibility. There's a
Mhm.
lot of flexibility with the coaching. I do about 98% of it via Zoom, which is pretty sweet. I walk with you along the boards, but most of the other people are not local. They're far away. I would
Right.
love to have at least 10 other coaches, and I want to only work about 80 coaching hours a month is what I want to limit myself to. That gives me a couple of weeks a month. I can travel and enjoy just kind of life and have almost a semi-retired type of existence, but also have a really great revenue. So my job number one is to fill that 80 coaching hours, and I'm pretty close. I think we'd only have room for me to be able to work with about another 6 advisors, let's say maybe 7 if they've got smaller teams. But at that point, then to not have our coaching is tricky in terms of you're going to scale it. If you're going to scale
Right.
it, you've either got to start charging more, and
Yeah.
I only have 10 clients at $200,000 a year,
Yeah.
or I have a lot more coaches that we can charge a reasonable rate,
Right. Right.
and could be able to get that done. So right now the goal is to be a coach of the coaches. And I've really enjoyed it. I think I underestimated how much I was going to love coaching coaches and to help
Mm.
them improve and grow and to be able
Yeah.
to support these teams and to kind of share that experience. So to be able to dive in with a visionary and kind of share, hey, these are some of my favorite people, and giving up a Brielle, who's one of my favorite coaching participants ever, works at Visionary, and have her working with Courtney and with Shayla, and to have them have breakthroughs with not just me. So again, I try to reiterate that coaching isn't about having the guru, it's the process. And having these affiliate coaches come in and use a good process and have your people still grow. I
Yeah.
want more of that. So 5, 10 years from now, would love to be able to keep working. I think I just turned 50. I see myself, Wayne, doing this at 75, not because I have to, but because I love doing it.
Right.
And I'm
Right.
thinking I'll probably coach in the mornings and then be out at the beach in the afternoon, but to be able to have that choice, because I truly enjoy it. And for me, it's not just I like working. I love the one-on-one coaching. A lot of people in my role are trying to get out of that. I love it. It gives me juice. It fires me up. It excites me to be able to see that difference that I can continue to make. And I don't want to stop doing that. I can't see myself retiring from that. And it's kind of interesting because I see you, Wayne, having conversations with people, whether you're working or not, and you're the same guy. Wayne is thinking and ideating and iterating, coming up with ways to help people improve their business. And I'm coaching, whether I'm in a formal coaching relationship or just hanging out with a buddy walking the board. So
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
me, we're doing what we're made to do. Let's keep doing more of it. So that's my thinking. Is that
No, that's
there's a
great.
lot more people getting help by coaches.
That's great. Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think that there's a strategy to what you're trying to do that's scale, but not huge scale, right? And it's a scale, but I don't. I think one of the challenges is when you go from where you are to. I'll pick on him. I'll take a pot shot. He's had a huge positive impact with his writings, but John Maxwell.
Sure.
I've met some John Maxwell approved coaches that I'm simply not very impressed with.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but they've got the little pin, or they've got the little paper, or they've been through the course, they paid their money. And so there's somewhere between where Veritas is today and
Mm.
where John Maxwell organization is today. That's a sweet spot to be able to genuinely be developing the coaches that are going to coach the people, and not
Yeah.
have turned it into basically a university brand that
Mm-hmm.
and look again, Maxwell changed my life, and
Sure.
continues to
Yeah.
change my
Yeah.
life. I continue everything that comes out of his organization. I listen to every book, every new you know every new organ, and anytime I've ever got an opportunity to see him in person, I do it. It's wonderful stuff, but it doesn't translate well on a mass scale.
Yeah,
And,
I'm aware of the fact that there are other coaches that want to build that, or even people ask me, "Hey, are you trying to become like a Dan Sullivan?" He's an exceptional,
yeah,
you know,
exceptional, and to this
you
day
know,
still, right?
leader.
Yeah,
And I would say if you're going to follow a process, he's got a great program. If you're going
yeah,
to follow
yeah,
curriculum, that's a really good curriculum.
yeah,
I'm not trying to. The world's got a Dan Sullivan. I am
yeah,
trying to be the best Trent Booth. And so here's one of the analogies that is just emerging now, right? There's Anheuser Busch, and then there's Tonewood. So Anheuser Busch is going to take over the world with all their beer. Craft Tonewood is a local, brewery that they don't want to be Anheuser Busch. They want to make the very best, New England style IPA and make Fuego and sell enough of it to have a great
right.
life.
There you
They
go.
don't
Yep,
want to take over the world. They don't want to
yep,
export to Australia. You know, I think there's a place for Dan Sullivan, there's a place for John Maxwell, and there's a little place for Veritas. I don't need
yep.
much. Just 10 million would be fine. I
There
don't have
you
to
go.
be greedy. There's plenty to go around. Dan Sullivan, I'm not coming after you. You got it.
That's it, right? So, yeah, and like you and I both know guys who are doing Dan Sullivan's training today,
Sure.
and it's
Yeah.
been wildly helpful for those people
You
in
should
different
follow
areas.
with your coach. Here's the thing: if you do the work, and that's what I said to my friend. So I'm coaching one of the guys that's going to Dan Sullivan. I'm like, dude, you should have paid me more. We could get more time together. All right, go to Dan Sullivan, go to Chicago, and I'll work with you through the curriculum. I don't bring curriculum to the table. We at Veritas are using 100% from scratch. Every single coaching relationship is unique and different.
Hmm.
So you're covering different stuff than anybody else that I'm coaching right now. It's your agenda. It's the intention of our qualitative process there.
Right. Right.
And I would even say this: I'm grateful for the Maxwell program being as part of where I got my initial
Yep.
certification for coaching.
Yep.
Also, I love the work that I did at Exchange and with the appreciative inquiry and John Berghoff and his team, and learning how to use a strengths-based approach. I was able to take that foundation and really go deep dive and help a lot of companies out there. So
Yeah.
if your listeners want to follow Exchange, that's X, the letter X with change. .com. If just search John Berghoff, even you'll find all that stuff there and how effective appreciative inquiry is. So
Right.
being able to just make a difference, that's the goal. But you don't have to make it as big as. I love hanging out with Wayne because Wayne's like, dude, you could be Anheuser-Busch. I'm like, I don't think I want to be that one. I know what I'm looking for,
Right.
and this is going to be enough,
Yeah.
in my mind.
So we're coming to the end of our time, and the final question that I always need to ask is, what does envision more mean to you? And we talked a little bit about how you're envisioning more, but what does envision more mean to you, Trent Booth?
Yeah, I love that we ask people this every time, and I love that as I've been interacting with it, even in anticipation of our session here today. Part of it envisioning more is envisioning more for yourself so that you can envision more for others.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're talking about identity drives behavior, if I see myself as being not a Mac guy, or if I see myself as being not a runner, not a hockey player, not a piano player, I don't play piano yet, right? And I've got time, right? I've got time. If I envision more and pause and think and become aware of some new areas to run in, I can become more. And what a blessing to be able to come more so that I can help more people out and get more good done in the world. That's what I'm going for.
That's amazing. That's great. Trent, thank you so much for being here today. It's been fantastic to get a bit of the backstory, a bit of the origin story on Trent Booth, and some of the evolution of where you are now. I'm just grateful for the lessons, grateful to be part of this journey with you, and grateful to have you part of the journey here with us at Visionary Wealth Management and the Envision More podcast. Thanks again, brother.
Hey. Thank you for listening to the Envision More podcast with Wayne Wagner Jr. of Visionary Wealth Management. We hope you were encouraged and inspired by the conversation today. If you want to dig deeper into the show notes or Wayne's work at Visionary, you can find us at envisionmore.com. That's Envision with a Z. Advisory services are provided through Wealth Plan Investment Management. Wealth Plan Investment Management and Visionary Wealth Management are separate entities. The content is developed from sources believed to be providing accurate information. The information in this material is not intended as tax or legal advice. Please consult legal or tax professionals for specific information regarding your individual situation. The opinions and material provided are for general information and should not be considered a solicitation for the purchase or sale of any security. Thanks for listening.